One. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Juneteenth Town Hall experience. I'm so glad to be here, so glad to celebrate ancestry, freedom, and community in so many ways. And also excited that Power Street has held space for this conversation today. So we're glad to have y'all. It's going to be a hoot, a holla, a good, cool time. First, I want to say Juneteenth is a significant event in celebration of freedom for those of us who have ancestry in the African diaspora and the claiming of our freedom, right? Celebrated on June 19th. Is holidays are celebrated for years in different Black communities throughout the United States and beyond. But recently has become a popular term, a popular thing that everyone wants to celebrate and include in holidays and paid holidays and all these things. But what we're grateful for is that it fosters this conversation of freedom that we can move forward. And so when Power Street came to me and said, let's have this town hall conversation, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And why not do it with some pretty awesome Philly artists, right? Black artists who are out there doing it and for the community, right? So tonight you'll have Donnell Powell, who is an amazing curator and artist, like just amazing. And then you have RyAnn, who is going to bring some poetry, right? Like some words that are essential to getting us freedom, right? And so I'm going to invite them on. Before I do that, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement of the space that we are holding and the links between our Indigenous ancestors, because Black is Indigenous. We'll get on that topic later, all right? We are gathered today from the ancestral lands of the Lenape and Lenape people. We honor the Lenape and the other Indigenous caretakers of this land and waters, the elders who lived here before, the Indigenous today, and the generations to come. We acknowledge the harm that colonialism and white supremacy have brought to these lands, in particular, the erasure of both First American and African diasporic identities. We honor the Indigenous and the enslaved people contributions to this land. We honor and celebrate their resilience and cultivate the revolutionary futures for their descendants. So no further ado, I want to welcome Donnell and RyAnn onto our live, so we can get our discussion started.
Hello.
Yo. What it do? So I want both of you to, introduce yourself. Tell us what it is that you do in the community for yourself, for your ancestry, all that. Run it down for us. But also, hype yourself. I'm being in the side going like, yeah, do that. You did that. You do that. Every day. Get it. So we're excited for that to happen. Then we're going to get started with some discussion questions. I got some good ones, y'all.
Solid. Go ahead.
Go first.
Word. Yo, what's up, everybody? My name is Donnell Powell. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I've been in Philly for like 12 years now. I'm a maker. I kind of dabble in everything creative creative speaking, theater, visual arts, poetry, music. Curation is kind of like my biggest draw right now. Um, and I'm also just like, a part of community in every sense of the word community. Like I'm a part of a couple friends groups where I'm a part of like my neighborhood park friends group because I'm all about like nature and just gardening. And I'm a teaching artist. I teach. I have several residencies in charter schools and public schools through different nonprofits like Philly Young Playwrights and the Painted. I mean, and Artwell. Yeah, and I'm just happy to be here. And yeah, I'm like also a dad, full-time dad. So like I'm gonna be in and out, kind of like tending to the baby or whatever. But yeah, that's me.
Yes, you did that.
Yes. So, hey everyone, my name is RyAnn Bryant. I'm Philly, born and raised, going five till I die. I've been here all year. I know. I mean, you're a slightly newcomer still. 12 years, not that.
Mhm.
But I am a poet. I'm an author. I have my own personal poetry book, and I'm also co-author to Poeticals. From Solatry, shout out to Jose Aleja, shout out to all the other authors of Poeticals. Um, I'm a nurse, so that's my community thing. So I'm considered a first responder. I've been in the medical field for over 10 years. So that's basically my balance. Like the art is my, release from my community service every day. So that's how I maintain in the city, and that's how I maintain as just, a Black woman in the city.
Period. Let's go
Yeah.
both against that. All right. Yes, I'm so excited to be here with these two and to have this discussion. Yo, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Sabriaya. I am an educator, poet, community ethnographer. I've been in Philly for 8 years now. It's crazy to think about because I came here to go to TU. And so I'm very excited to be here. A lot of the work I do is centered around youth advocacy for Black and Brown youth, about decolonizing literacy, inclusion of diasporic language and things for the youth in our spaces. I currently serve as literacy program director at Treehouse Books in North Philly, where I think basically I call it, I just be causing a ruckus, And we're going to talk about causing a ruckus and why it's important to link back to freedom later. But I am so excited to get started in this conversation because it's going to be just, a lovely kind of like community discussion. I know I've had discussions with Donnell that like, I was like, yo, this is it. I can do this all the time. I love community talk. And I think that's also a central part of Juneteenth and about freedom and discussion of freedom because the conversation continues. So the first thing I want to introduce to y'all in like reflection, there's a popular Nina Simone video where this reporter is in her like space talking about, what does freedom mean for you? What does it mean to be free? And he's like, freedom, like freedom means no fear, right? And it's a topic that I've brought up to a lot of my different artists, like friends. They're like, hey, does freedom mean no fear? Like, does that no fear in freedom? Is no fear in the process of freedom? Or what does freedom mean past having no fear? If it's not fear, what is it? Is it joy? Is it hope? And all these things. So I was curious to what y'all like reflection on that was. Is freedom linked to not having fear? Or is freedom linked to a multitude of other things?
When I think of freedom, I think of living life on your terms without any other interference of how you perceive your life to feel like, whether it's joy, waking up in the morning, just feeling resilient and abundant, and whatever you decide to do. So living life on your terms without any type of interference with work and outside, contributing to chaos. So that's my idea of freedom. It's just doing things that I truly enjoy, not having to sacrifice my happiness for anything.
Wow, that was beautiful. Sad. Yeah, similarly, I think it's funny, like it's so too. I'm gonna just share. I'm a storyteller, so
Go
like I
ahead.
like to share based on a story. So the first story was I was at a dope coffee shop up in Germantown called Germantown Espresso Bar. For those that are listening, for those that are viewing, please check out Germantown Espresso Bar. It's a dope scene. But while I was in this coffee shop, this man asked me, this black dude asked me just like, what does it mean to be free? And I was like in a rush, like I was literally just there to get my coffee and just get out or whatever. And he hit me with this question, and it was like I wasn't expecting that question at all, and it took me a moment, and I just kept it real with him. I was like, "That's a loaded question that I was not prepared for." But essentially, what I think freedom, what I told him, just because I wanted to leave him with something, was I think freedom is just like the idea of being able to manifest like limitless possibilities. Like
Mm-hmm.
you like anything is possible. That is freedom. Like if I was to like if I only had like 20 characters to define freedom, it would be just like limitless, like just possibilities. Um and yes, I do think fear is definitely associated with freedom in a sense of just like you can't be scared to like fucking like do just be great and just like experience like your ultimate purpose and like your ultimate just like yeah, your ultimate purpose. And I think it's definitely related to fear, but it's also related to so many other things. The other story that I had was today I was like pulling on my parking spot, and it was this guy, this contractor who was like cutting grass or whatever. But he had all of these bumper stickers on the back of his car, and I mean, I learned that he was a big Trump supporter because he had like Veterans for Trump sticker. And he had this other sticker that really caught my eyes. And I don't care if you're a Trump supporter or whatever, to each his own. But the sticker that caught my eyes was that it was about freedom. It said something on the lines of like thank a veteran for your freedom or whatever. And it like pretty I guess this guy was like, a military person. And it had me thinking, I was like, because I'm very anti-military, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very anti-war. Even though I come from I got family members that are veterans or whatever, I'm just anti-military, anti-war. And I was like, wow, if like it's like this person really like thinks that like freedom is associated with like the work that veterans put in, and I'm just
Right.
like, whoa, it had me thinking because I'm so not associated with that way of life. So it's interesting you asked this question because I had like two experiences that like kind of spoke to this idea of freedom.
Yeah. And I asked that question. No, no, like that's perfect because I asked that question because it is so loaded. Because every word that we use is loaded because it has
Right.
someone can take a different definition to it, right? Like you can sit in the room and be like, "What is freedom?" And I'll be like, "Okay, I can put in my PowerPoint. Freedom is this," and somebody was sitting there like, "Dang, what the fuck freedom is? What you mean?"
Right.
And it's like, oh, our world of freedom is freedom also the freedom of interpretation. It's freedom also the freedom of non-binary, right? Not being held to a binary to interpret things, right? Because as artists, a lot of times I feel like we crave freedom in
Mm-hmm.
our art medium. It's like, don't tell me how to write my poem. I'm gonna
Right.
do it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Don't tell me how I'm gonna paint this picture. Give me the freedom, the time to do it, right? But then we live in the system that tells us, hey, things need to be done this time, right? In this structure. I had the question for freedom similar, Donnell, about like I was recently talking with this. My mom sent me articles. I was thinking of like, wanting to make a transition in my life, a change. And she was like, "Well, it also could be like systematic stuff inside you." And I was like, "What you mean? I'm free from systematics." And she's like, "No." She was like, "Just think
Uh,
about it. From the time you're young and they put you in kindergarten, every 4 years something changes. Every 4 to 5 years something changes, and it's a graduation, or you move up to something, and then you get to adulthood, and it's in you to be like, oh, every 4 to 5 years I gotta change, right? And it's like, but I'm having the freedom to change. But are you? Is your freedom influenced by other things that are happening? Because we talk about, Juneteenth, a lot of times, like, Juneteenth is something to celebrate, but it should also be noted that a lot of the freedom came in spurts.
Right.
The freedom came in spurts. So for some of our ancestors, they didn't have that immediate, like, we free.
Right.
It was 5 or 10 years later, and that's crazy to think about.
Right. And we're still working on freedom. It's not something that it hasn't been like relinquished, like to the point where everyone feels free. We still feel enslaved, encapsulated, confined in some way. Like you said, it's coming in spurts, and we're still fighting for that quote unquote freedom, or our perception of freedom.
And that's crazy to think about. Like, moving on from, like, the notion of freedom as the word, right? If we talk about today's time, I think Zuri's like, listen, I need to have a conversation too. I think right now. I'm gonna know what freedom means to me. Right? So I think notion of freedom, and then moving into the action of freedom, because we talk a good game about what freedom looks like, but the actions that we take as a community towards freeing ourselves of certain structures in our society, or even ourselves and our bodies and our minds and how we move about the day, can shift. What are some actions that you have, like, purposely put in your life to, maintain your sense of freedom, or your definition of freedom?
Interesting. That's deep. Hold on, hold on. I'm listening. I'm here. I just gotta pick up the baby.
The baby want to be a part of this too. Put her on the screen.
I got some things to say.
Hi, baby.
Oh, you're cutie. Hi.
I think ways in which I've, like, tried to manifest freedom is, like, on some simple shit. Like, I told myself, like, one day I was like, I'm never eating McDonald's, never again. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was chained to McDonald's because McDonald's had a dollar menu. I was broke as shit and I wanted to eat. You know what I mean? So I felt a slave to McDonald's. So I was like, yo, I'm never eating McDonald's again. And I tell you, a lot of you now, I haven't eaten from McDonald's in easily over, like, 12 years. So that's, like, and then, like, a way of manifesting freedom was just, like, breaking away from, like, just, like, vices, I guess, in a sense. You know what I mean? What else? Another way, like, it's just like the, like, breaking standards, or just like the status quo of, like, what you should do. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I should have said this in my introduction, but I am a, like, straight up, like, I am a full-time substitute teacher, right? And I'm unapologetic about it. I love substituting. Can I be a regular teacher? Hell yeah, I have all the credentials to do it, but I don't, right? Because I don't, again, want to slave to no bullshit ass educational system that I don't believe in. So that's another way why I'm exercising my freedom of just, like, being unapologetic and being very content and just being the best substitute teacher I can be. Again, freedom. Freedom from just, like, what society tells you should do with your degree. You know what I mean? I'm gonna stop because I'm about to take you out of church. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
You had to stop, but it's cool. But I guess so. Holding yourself accountable to me is a big deal when it comes to your perception of freedom. So if it's things that you know that you want to accomplish on the road to achieve that said freedom, you have to hold yourself accountable and neglect the things that you ignore on just because, like, oh well, like this is, you know, you have to know yourself. Say like, listen, this is what I want. If you don't actively work towards that, you can't blame other people or other circumstances for the position that you want to be in life. So I'm very big on self accountability and like mapping out where you want to see yourself, kind of like organizing this, like, so it goes back to having structure. Like even the way you say like, oh, we want to have freedom, but freedom also takes structure to get there, to and discipline to get there. So it's like, are we truly free? Just like Donna said, like, okay, you want to eat McDonald's, right? But you know McDonald's is bad for you. So you put yourself in structure to say, I'm not going to eat at McDonald's no more. To be free of McDonald's, you had to discipline yourself and create structure to get there. So it's like, but yeah, self accountability to me is the way to really get to your achieved freedom.
I love that, right? I love that self accountability. I'm gonna piggyback of that, as well as like we're gonna come back to what the structures, right? Because organizing is a part of getting to freedom and maintaining. But the distinguishing how we organize is what I'm always curious about. For me, I would say like freedom, the action of freedom has always been linked to me for vulnerability, because as a Black femme, you know, a lot of times, you know, there's a resiliency that I'm expected to have, which I do have, but with a couple of vulnerability. The freedom that comes with allowing myself, I'm gonna cry when the hell I'm gonna cry, or I'm gonna say what I have to say when I need to say it, right? And not kind of like stuffing down my emotions or my standards. You know what I'm saying? In a staff meeting, I'm gonna keep it straight. I'm gonna keep it 100. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not here to bow down to what you think is professional in a way. And I do that sometimes with my kids as well. They have a freedom with me to kind of like test. And that's something that happens. You know what I'm saying? Like I give them the freedom to test. You know, they can roast me on a rim. I'll be like, okay, cool. You ready? Are you open to what's going to return? Do you know what I'm saying? Or like even when you come to my classroom, and I don't know why I call it classroom. It's really like they call it their second home space. Because when they come in, it's like, this is our space. This is my freedom space. They can ask me, Sabriaya, can we move this little couch over here? And I'd be like, okay, can we have a discussion about how that's not going to function? But they like, but can we have a discussion how it is? Do you know what I'm saying? The vulnerability of like, listen, Mr. Sabriaya is having a hard day today. I don't feel it. I'm not feeling it. And then being like, all right, cool. We're going to chill today. That's cool. We can chill. You ain't feeling it. The vulnerability has allowed so much freedom to open up for me. Because I'm not holding on to those emotions. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like the notion of anger. Rage and anger is always connected to the narrative of Black folks getting our freedom or fighting for our rights. Like we don't have a entitlement to feel those emotions. Like rage and anger are not natural emotions to work through.
But can I push this a little bit and be like, why do we have to be so fucking angry? Why do we have to exemplify rage? Because like those things, honestly, that because I'm an energy driven person, that exerts a lot of energy. To be angry, to like have rage takes a lot of energy. And I'm not gonna say it's negative energy. I'm just gonna say it's energy, period. And you know what I mean? And I'm just like, damn, like why does freedom for us have to look like anger and rage? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's something. Yeah, that's a question I had. Just like, why is freedom for Black folk connected to anger and rage? You know what I mean? Because like, if you think about the uprisings that happened or whatever around George Floyd, you know, that some people, like, that was rage. Like so many people felt so free in that moment, like lighting shit on fire, throwing trash cans at shit, flipping cars. Like that was freedom to me. They were like, I don't care, like I'm free. But it was so much rage and like anger behind those actions and shit. And I'm just like, and again, I just know it exerts a lot of energy to be in that state. And you know, for me, it can be draining energy. Straight up, it can be draining energy. And like, why this? Like, I don't know. Let me just be, because I had another thought based on something you had, but this anger and this rage thing is like hit me right now. But I also want to go back. I don't want to lose the thought I originally had. Was I also like think freedom for me is also linked to curiosity.
Ooh.
I'm a very
Okay.
curious person, right? And again, going back to my definition of limitless possibilities, I think just being a curious being um, pivots you to freedom. You know what I mean? It pivots you into a direction of freedom. So that's kind of what I wanted to say based on like you saying that your kids test you sometimes. I think like the idea of them testing you is based off like them being curious to see like how things gonna go. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I know I just said a lot, but yeah, pretty
You
much,
yeah.
yeah. It was really curiosity and how that is related to freedom, but also just like why is black people for freedom got to be anger and rage for us sometimes.
Ooh. Ooh. That reminds me
Some
of the song by
get
Lauryn
fed
Hill
up
called Black
sometimes
Rage.
too. Like
Yeah.
some people, I don't think it's like a negative emotion to be fed up or to feel like you're not being heard. Like that's your breaking point. And sometimes the result of having a breaking point is anger and rage. And I don't feel like that's necessarily wrong because every human, no matter what, has that emotion. So when I see like our people get fed up and they exhibit anger and rage, I understand why they're feeling that way. And sometimes you just had to give them that grace to know, like, okay, it's okay to feel that way because these are the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that people choose to focus more so on the rage and the anger as opposed to peacefulness and trying to reason with the circumstances that are happening. Of course, they're going to shed light on the negative and the looting and the lighting shit on fire and busting windows out of cop cars and looting like the stores and things like they're going to focus on that to make that the grand scheme of things like this is how they behave because they want freedom when in actuality it didn't always have to be that way and it wasn't always that way. It got to that point because people were fed up, people reached
Mm-hmm.
their break point. So it's still a natural emotion, so I don't look at it as like it's a bad thing because every single person, no matter what race, nationality, anything, they have that breaking point and they have those emotions and they should be able to express that.
Yeah. And right, you touched on it so perfectly. It reminds me of the song by Lauryn Hill, Black Rage, where she's
Mm-hmm.
like, Black Rage is found on two-thirds of a person, and goes down the list of this buildup. Because oftentimes, when you are told as a person that your rage is invalid and is not acceptable to do, you'll stuff it. And I don't know
Okay.
about y'all, but anytime I stuff my rage down or how I'm feeling, like that irritated me a little bit, it
Mm-hmm.
builds into this wall of rage that at one point combusts, right? And like you said, right, like I think we focus a lot on the rage because it justifies, it hides all the before the rage hit, right? Because I always say with a toddler, I'm like, a toddler hits that rage point, but you can see everything that has happened to lead to that. Or they randomly just like, listen, I gotta get this out. Hold on. And you're like,
Right.
okay, cool. And they're back and they're like, okay, I'm happy now. We're good.
Right.
Right. I also think that I love the notion of how is other emotions tied to our freedom, right? Because I think there's freedom in our cookouts. There's
Mm-hmm.
freedom in the way in which we choose to raise our black youth, right? There's freedom in when
Yes.
we choose to organize and clean, make sure our neighborhood is straight. You know what I'm saying? There's freedom in that we maintain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we don't talk as often. We call our black boy joy, our black girl magic, but those things set us free. That
Mm-hmm.
notion, right? Like this, I always say, like the natural hair movement that like occurred was a part of a freedom of
Mm-hmm.
like, listen, why the hell are you so focused on that?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than what you're doing with your hair is, it's just your hair. You know what I'm saying? What you want to do with it. do what you want to do in that way. And I think there's a lot of different other movements that we've seen that encourage us to embrace other emotions of freedom. But I think the continuousness of violence perpetuated towards Black and brown bodies has that rage. Like anytime I'm ready to choose joy today, but this month come and here's another shooting. Here's another. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, oh. And I think when I say freedom for me is vulnerability, is that I allow myself in front of my kids to process that with them, and I allow them room to process it. Because when I say that, I think my youth sometimes is numb.
Right.
My North Philly youth is numb. Sometimes it's like I may say something and something has happened, or I might have emotion, but they're not tied to that because they're afraid of that rage, of that anger. And though it takes a lot of energy, I think also need to focus on what happens after that rage has been extinguished. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what happens after that? Yeah. Do we choose rest? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Wow, you hitting on something really dope. I mean, just speaking about just like freedom, right? Going back to freedom. I know so many like, even I lived in Nicetown for a long time, right? And Nicetown, for those that know Philly, Nicetown is not one of the most crime-free places in Philly. And it used to like bother me when a lot of my neighbors, I mean, these are generation of families who've lived in Nicetown for generations, decades, say like they didn't feel safe like utilizing the neighborhood park or having their kids at the park, right? So when we go back to freedom, like, and we talk about Black and brown people, sometimes like I question, are we free amongst ourselves? Like, if we gonna really talk about it, like let's really talk about it, especially because you brought up shootings, and I'm about to like stroke, I'm about to ruffle some feathers to some people who's listening, but I mean, a lot of the gunplay that we hearing are happening in Black and brown communities, bad Black and brown people against Black and brown people. You know what I mean? So let's talk about freedom. You know what I mean? Like when we think about freedom, when we think about Juneteenth and what happened on that glorious, day centuries ago, our ancestors wasn't looking or projecting this for us to be here. So again, are we free? What is freedom? I don't know. When I live when Nicetown was a predominantly Black neighborhood, and you had Black people saying, "I don't feel safe having my kid in the street amongst other Black kids, Black people." Let's really talk about freedom. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. But I also feel like that's the accountability thing too. Like we as Black people have to hold ourselves accountable for the things that happen amongst our communities, like the children, like things like half of these killings are happening by babies. They're not even full grown adults. They're children. And my thought process when it comes to like these young boys killing each other is like, what has been instilled in them to make them not love themselves and hate the person that they're killing? They don't even love themselves yet, and they're killing people that they don't love as well. Like, what is instilled in their minds to not have that love for themselves to say, hey, I'm not going to jeopardize my life, nor am I going to take someone's life and hurt someone others, like their parents and their family. So it's like, I feel like it's very deep rooted beyond what we can even process at this point, or just saying like, another rest in peace, another semi condolences to this person and that person. It's so deep rooted. So it's like, where do we begin in holding everyone accountable for this mindset or this process?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my go ahead, because I had so much to piggyback.
I was gonna say, what you hit the nail on the coffin with deep rooted, because I'm be honest with y'all, and I'm gonna say, and it's something that we discuss a lot in Africana kind of studies, conversations, things like that. Black and Black crime does not exist. I'm gonna let y'all know. Because if you went to a white community and there were things that happened that we call white and white crime, Hispanic on Hispanic crime, Black and Black crime is a term that was invented to kind of like perpetrate this violence nature that they assume we have, right? But that does not mean that crime happening between Black people is not happening. You know what I'm saying? So that has to be distinguished between the term that was used to kind of continue to oppress us and the term, the actual reality. But when you say deep rooted, whenever a situation happens, my first thing is, I believe that our community needs more access to the history, the acknowledgement. Where did the guns come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where did the drugs come from? Where did all these things come from? They were implanted in our community time and time again to perpetrate what was already the things that already exist in human nature, like the disagreements. It was like, here, put this in your little thing. Use these. Or
don't start talking about redlining.
Right? Let's not talk about. Let's talk about the alternatives and the ways in which it's implanted our community by to continue the notion of oppression systems. And does that mean that we don't take accountability for the actions in which our children are taking these guns and using them? No. That means we figure out, how do we educate our children, not in a way that I think oftentimes we say stop the gun violence or in their face. We automatically accuse them of being the suspect in the future. We automatically assume that they are going to be the next one. When we say to them, stop the gun violence, put down the guns over we're saying, oh, we know you're going to end up doing it, but I want you to think about it before you do it. Rather than saying, do you know that this exists in your community because of this? Is it something that you want in your space, in your future? When I talk to my kids, I talk to them about that. I'm a good little story about last month. I was literally about to head outside the office door at Treehouse to go pick up my kids. And as soon as I hit the door, 17 gunshots rang out at the corner of 15th and Susquehanna, where I used to pick up my kids. Usually I was running late. Usually I'm standing there. And a 15-year-old little boy was shot to death. The school let him out early. He had walked out. And someone from a fight weeks ago decided they were retaliating. And I remember my first thought being, if these kids knew, this is not the only way to solve these situations. But they don't know. We teach them, don't do it. We don't teach them alternative ways. Someone to Gabby asked a question about what tools can we give to BIPOC communities who are experiencing rage. The tools are the education. The tools are, and education being the most, informal way. Right? Because a lot of times I think we have these notions, it's continuing because we're not having the conversation that is not aimed at victimizing or accusing. And that's hard to do because we have trauma. I don't know about y'all. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, around the corner from Scoop and them. So it's a trauma. It's like it hits you. So you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to do it. Right. But we have to. We have to have these discussions. We have to have these moments. But how do we do it without accusing the future?
Right.
Sometimes, man, I don't know. I think I'd be like, I feel like we've been saying we have to have conversations. We've been saying this for years and years and years and
Come
years.
on.
Like, again, when are we going to stop putting the pedal to the metal? You know what I mean? I think RyAnn hit something. I think a lot of this shit is deep rooted. You know what I mean? This 1 hour segment of Juneteenth is not gonna solve it all. You know what I mean? It's really deep rooted. It's complex. It's interconnected. It's just like I'm over saying we have to have a conversation. 10 years ago, the same thing was happening to our communities, and we were saying we need to have the conversations. We was having candlelight visuals then. We still having candlelight visuals now. I think that it's deep rooted, but I also think it's something else. It's about freedom being also connected to love. A lot of us don't even love ourselves. A lot of us don't even love ourselves. Let's really talk about it. It's one, we can say it's trauma, but it's also just the lack of love for ourselves. You know what I mean? I'm just over people. It's deep rooted on so many levels. That's all. It's deep rooted.
Donnell, do you think it's also a responsibility? Like you talk about, right? I talk about accountability. I think there's also a lack of people who just want to do it. You know what I'm saying? You ever been in a job and you I'm ready to do the shit that needs to be done. I'm actually the one who's going to make sure the shit gets done. When it comes to my kids or comes to my community, I'm going to take responsibility for my community.
Right.
But you got more folks be like, that ain't my business.
Yes. Say it again for the people in the back. Say it again. Zori said, say it again for the people in the back. Yes, exactly. And I come across so many people like that. And again, that's why I'm very intentional. Again, going back to like me being a substitute teacher, like I know me personally, I know I'm way more effective touching more like I know I'm more effective being a substitute teacher than being planted in one school. Being a substitute teacher allows me to reach hundreds of kids in all pockets of Philadelphia. I travel in different communities. And when I show up, even if it's for a day substituting, I make a fucking lasting impression on them kids. And again, what you talk about, having the conversations, we can't just say don't go pick up that gun and shoot. We got to say don't go pick up that gun and shoot because this is what your ancestors did for you tonight and all of that, right? So again, connected it to the past. But I'm just over the rhetoric of we just gotta do it. I'm just over talk. I just feel like we live in a talk society.
About it, do it.
Yeah.
Especially because you got to come to their level. Like you have, like in our communities, kids that they listen to this influential music that glorify crime and op culture and guns and drugs and things like that. So those are the role models for the kids. That's what they're looking at. They're not paying attention to what the old heads are saying. So it's kind of like you got to get on their level to make them understand, or to like, hey, you see where this is getting them, like related to rap culture. You see what this one just got booked, this one just got indicted, this one just got hit with a RICO charge. So this is the journey that happens when you live this type of lifestyle, and not talk down to them. Like, I don't think kids really respond when you're talking down to them in an authoritative manner. Feel like they're being told what to do or their way of thinking is stupid. Like, you kind of got to like sway them to like, hey, I understand that this is cool. However, this is the result of this action. Like, I had an English teacher when I was in 12th grade. I went to high school, and he said, every choice in your life is very like demanding. You have wise choices. Choice can change your entire direction. It can change your life. So be careful with your choices. And I've always kept in the back of my mind. He wasn't a parent. Shout out to the educators. You both are educators. So it's very important, imperative that children have you in their about that. It's just like, oh, baby has something to say. But yeah, just thinking about how, our children are really influenced by so many violent things. Like, how do we touch them in a way that it doesn't seem authoritative, but with love and with care, and with them knowing that, hey, this is not to tell you that, you're a bad person or you're a bad child, but just to show you that if you go down this road, your life may not have any longevity.
And that conversation, and that looks different. I think when we talk about stepping up there, let's talk about the burnout that comes with freedom. You know what I'm saying? Because Donna, we talk a good game educated, but I know we be tired. Because it'd be like, I can't, I want nothing. And somebody's like, you can't save them all. I was like, I ain't trying to save them all. I don't have to save them all. I said, I'm trying to get the rest of these motherfuckers to step up so that the ratio is increased. You know what I'm saying? So like when you talk about it, like a lot of times the work, right, as an educator, or you have that one person who's going hard, who's like, I'm gonna actually do it. I'm gonna make sure we got the supplies. I'm gonna make sure that we're teaching the kids. I'm gonna do that. And you turn someone else, and you're like, so what have responsibility? Because I remember back in the day, even though, a 90s kid, things were, different, but I'm so grateful for the ways in which other people in my community stepped up for me as a child when my mother was burned out and couldn't do so. Do you know what I'm saying? As a single mother, like, I'm grateful that my aunties or my teachers who were like, oh, let me, I got Sabriaya. I'll take her to the show out way in the county that she has to make. Or I'll make sure we got to pull together as a family and make sure, that our kids get the textbooks they need, or they got that they can go to that abroad experience they want to. Oh, what's the pot? You know what I'm saying? It's like even when like it's like okay, Missouri's birthday coming up. Can y'all put some cash in a collector fund for whatever she want to do in her life when she turns 18? So we know she got it. What's the collective building that we're doing? What is the community building that we're doing? Because it's saying it's all these kids. Wow, oh I can't do it. I gotta mind my business. No, it's like I don't know about y'all. Like I could go down the block and do some crazy shit because I know Miss Marion was gonna come to my mom and be like,
Right.
"So I saw Sabriaya down the way with that boy down that way. I'm gonna tell you right now, this is what she was doing. This is what time she was there. I couldn't get away with it.
They
It
could
was
whoop you back
like,
too.
and because it was like I'm accountable for you. Miss Marion was like, I know Leslie. I love Leslie. It's go back to love. No, now it's like, what's the love? Because that's honestly what it is. Because it's not enough time. Even as educators, even as the one event that we throw or the 1 hour that we do. Sometimes these kids will come to my after school and they'll go home and they go home to things that are not a loving environment.
Right.
And it's like, how you know what I'm saying? They want to be like there till 7 p.m. at night. They'd be like, oh, Mr. Bria, can I hang out with you? And I'd be like, Mr. Bria, I want to go home and sleep. But I get why. Because they're like, oh, I just want to hang in a space that's like just I can be me. Right? Sir, I knew you.
Yeah. She been having a lot to say. I mean, it's crazy. I was doing like these weekly, like Instagram, like morning meditation posts or whatever. But one post I put up that got a lot of like love from the community or a lot of responses was I was talking about like freedom in the sense of like the education system because that's just what I'm tied to professionally, education, and just like the fact that like I was working at a private Quaker school, a well-resourced private Quaker school up in Germantown, and I was like, damn, like I felt like when I tell you like just like the substitute experience and just like just seeing the kids just like love coming to school, I was like, how can we replicate this? Like, why can't like the neighborhood public school kind of have this feel of just like this joy that we talking about? Like I saw so many kids at this Quaker private school with so much joy just being at school or whatever, right? But I was like, damn, freedom, right? So when you think about like freedom in an education system, it's like I should have the freedom to say, hey, I want to put, even though I'm a artist and I don't make a lot of money, I should have the freedom to say, I want Zori to go to the best school in this city or whatever. And if that school is a private school, again, I should have the freedom to be able to send, and there should be no boundary. There should be no wall. I think Karen Smith added something in the comment talking about freedom is not having walls up, right? There should be no wall to block me from that limitless possibility of my daughter getting what I perceive as a great education or whatever, right? But again, like, why can't public schools like be on that same level as private schools? And there are some public schools in the city, like the Centrals, the Mastermans, the Palombos, but they're very small, selective, and they're very competitive or whatever, right? So when we think of freedom and we think of Juneteenth, it's not even just like, we still have to ask the question: are we free? You know what I mean? Like, are we free?
We're still at the rock, like still chipping away, trying to reach that core of freedom that said freedom that we're talking about. It's not there because look at the funding. Look at how the funding goes in the inner city. So back to systemic, back to it being deep rooted. Like you said, you were in the county. You have a school that is properly funded and properly, where kids enjoy being there. They feel like they want to come there. And then you have schools being shut down here in the city, programs being discontinued, after school music programs and theater programs, all those extracurricular activities being shut down because they aren't funded. So it's just like when you look at the grand scheme of things, why? It's because it's set up to be that way, the way they want it to be. They want the system to be a failing system for those specific areas.
And they want that. And the reason why they want that is because it continues the cycle.
Exactly.
Continue the cycle. When I started the equity pod during the pandemic, where I would bring Black and brown children into my space to help them with virtual learning while their parents had to go work full-time jobs. Do you know what I'm saying? I remember my friend sent me this picture of an old schoolhouse back in the 1930s. You know what I'm saying? Where I was like, this ain't new to us. We've been doing this. We've been trying to create alternatives. Do you know what I'm saying? And Juneteenth also celebrates this resiliency of that. I'm gonna say it. Of all the POC kind of cultures and communities, Black people sometimes we get the short end of the stick. We still fight for reparations. We still fight for this apology that goes into death into our ancestors, right? The dismantling of systems, you know what I'm saying? That have they continue to reproduce. We think it's done. It's like, oh no, it's the same old person. We're just, we're gonna give you a new little line. Like that's how gentrification worked. That's how, the migration up north worked. It was like, come up, we got jobs for you. We got you. And they get up here and they get these jobs, but you still it's a subtle racism. It's like, you still ain't on our level.
It's redlining. It's redlining.
Yes.
Come up here and work, but you don't have no access to home ownership. You know what I mean? At least some of the people that stayed in the South, they got acres of land and land to say I own. You know what I mean? So again, another word that I associate with freedom is manipulation. Like it's so much, wow, this is deep. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's crazy.
It is manipulation, I think. But Ryan, I want to talk more about also how freedom and art come in, because that's really, let me tell you, because a lot of times our freedom has been expressed and supported through the arts. Do you know what I'm saying? There's some times where I'm like, what if we had never had Nina Simone? How the hell was we gonna get through that time? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or Maya Angelou writing what she had to write. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or Sonia Sanchez. All these how because they was really spitting the truth.
And going back to what you said about the rage, Nina Simone. You ever hear the story about the guy wasn't trying to pay Nina Simone and she shot at him?
Yeah, she's like, what the hell?
Sometimes rage works. Even in the olden days, she shot at him. She said, "You're gonna pay me what I'm worth. You're gonna pay me my money for my art."
Exactly. Or let's talk about how a lot of times, and this, I think Donnell would like this expression about how when we talk about freedom and of art, don't y'all get tired of I love to represent my ancestors. I do. I love to talk about Black issues and things like that. But sometimes I just want to write a good country song. But that's Black too. You know what I'm saying? Because when we talk about it, a lot of art forms that we are, having this, world stem from BIPOC communities.
Yes.
And Black communities. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times there's a limitation that happens of oh, that's not Black. You can't. No, country music is Black. Or I definitely can root theater as it is today back to a Black person. I can. You know what I'm saying? It's like that Jordan Peele rule. He's like, everything is Black.
Yes.
Y'all just don't know it. Yes. They don't know it. They
once we get the seasoning on that joint, you can't listen. It's Black. It's Black. Sure.
So I encourage. I think I encourage kind of the way in which even in Philadelphia theater community, Philly has such a huge founding of artists, Black, brown artists who are out here, right? And I'll be going to these shows and I'll be like, y'all really be living this boring life. What you got one show cast with a whole cast of of BIPOC people. That's boring. This is boring. That's it. And then the audience ain't responding, ain't even snapping, clapping back.
Right.
I don't like to see shows, y'all. Now I really don't like to see shows with if I'm not in the community of Black and brown folks.
Right.
I really be like, because I'd be like, I like to respond. And when I take my kids to show, they'd be like, I know she ain't do that. And I'd be like, you can't. My folks would turn around like, did this that child just scream out? Yes, because
Right.
that's it's a part of the experience. So I
Yes.
want to talk about more like what in our last 5 minutes or so, because I want to make sure I respect y'all time and y'all, and y'all space. Um, about what is freedom in art as it ties to kind of the continuation of like how we document freedom.
Not being boxed in by anybody's dictation of what your art is supposed to be. Like, I feel like being a poet myself, I can speak on just feeling like kind of intimidated coming into the art world in regards to poetry, just feeling like I had to have like a cookie cutter type of presentation about myself until I had that realization like my art is mine. It belongs to me, and how I present it shouldn't be dictated by anyone, or to say, oh, that's not how poets say poems, or that's not how the cadence is supposed to go. So I think it's the freedom to just be authentic and present yourself on how you feel, and own your art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to piggyback on that. I think for freedom and art for me, especially in the Black community, is just more like I'm just at a place where I'm tired of like experiencing art to deal with race. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's so many of those work that already exist that I'm over that. I'm like, there's so many black artists and creatives that are capable of producing art that speaks more than just the black slave narrative or the black
Yes.
race narrative. Like, you know what I mean? I know my homie right now doing a dope ass comic superhero book that has nothing to do with race or whatever, but it features all black characters. So that's what freedom looks
Yeah,
like for me. Like if I yeah, that's I think we get that.
because we're
Um uh,
that too. Like,
like,
we're more than that.
yeah, we're
Well,
just
more.
more we're just way more than that. And I think and I credit people like Jordan Peele who's pushing the envelope on just like us being more than that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Just with the type of art that he brings to the big screens.
Mhm.
Um yeah, I think I think that's I mean really what I would like to see. It's just like
And
yeah.
collaborative work too. It's
Yes.
collaborative work and just embracing one another. Even though, like, I know a lot of times like we get caught up in not wanting to do the same things, or looking at, oh, like somebody else is already doing that. I don't want to put forth my art because I feel like someone else is doing it. But everyone is different. And I feel like if we embrace everyone as being different, even if they're doing the same thing, it could be more of a collective love for one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we get so caught up in not wanting to feel like we're copying or being like someone else, but at the end of the day, my sauce isn't your sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Ingredients, that don't mean it's gonna taste the same. So
I like that. I like that. I'm gonna steal that. I'm stealing that.
Like,
My sauce is your sauce. It might be the same ingredients, but it ain't gonna taste the same. Ain't
yes.
wow, ain't every black person macaroni and cheese tasting the same.
They
Same
don't. They
ingredients, but it's
don't.
not gonna taste the same.
no.
Yes.
They
It's
don't.
funny. I want to share one more story before we depart. I was at the University of Michigan at this conference about a week ago. It was a dope conference. It was just a bunch of like arts administrators who work in like university settings. And we had this book discussion around this book called Emergent Strategy. Are y'all familiar with it? Emergent Strategy by Adrian Marie Brown. So I was the only black person in the space. Not I wasn't just the only black male, but I was just the only black person in the space. And I
Mhm.
was surrounded by a bunch of, I'm gonna say majority white women who I felt ripped that book apart. Like ripped it apart, right? And I think they ripped it, and like one of the main critiques that I think the consensus of all of their critique was that the format, like if you know the book Emergent Strategy, like Adrienne Marie break every tradition of writing, and she
Mhm.
bring her own style, her own recipe, her own she so they like ripped it. They was like, I couldn't finish the book because like she would have like a narrative here, and then she would break it with like a random poem. Like they chopped her format, but
I found when we talk about freedom and art, what I appreciate about that book so much is that like she does break every single traditional way of this is how you write a book. And you know what I mean? So going back, so that is the perfect example of freedom of art is emergent
Yeah.
strategy, her book.
Or Intozaki Shange. When Intozaki Shange came out and was like, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna do a choreo poem. Everybody was like, what the fuck is a choreo poem? And she was like, y'all need to know. We just gonna do it. Right?
Yeah.
Got her group of girls together, was like, let's do it. Put it together. And even the structure of how it was done on Broadway, it's always amazing to me because people don't know that like it would be so packed. They would have people on stage, sitting on the side of the stage, like in true black theater. Because in a black, I know what y'all in a black show, we'd be like, listen, squeeze in, come on, get in.
Right.
All right, you can sit. You want to stand in that corner over there? All right. I got a chair over here. Take that. You know what I'm saying? And because we all gonna get this, we all gonna be here together. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's the notion that it was. I remember doing it at Temple. And it's like Sean herself came out to see it because it was like she was getting honored by the Philadelphia City and Keith City, and Dr. Kamika, who's at Temple, was like, "I'm gonna be there. Let's get it going." And I remember we were doing a production practicum where we were talking to the rest of my white theater community, and they were like, "I just had a hard time following it." I was just like. And some of the words weren't written correctly. And I was like, because it's not meant for you, motherfucker. Like, sometimes.
Don't even worry about it.
Sometimes freedom to me was also boundaries. It's like, this ain't for you.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And that's okay.
And that is okay, yes.
And it's for everybody.
But they want to be so bad. I said, listen, I don't argue with y'all about Chekhov. Or like some things. Because I'm telling y'all right now, I'm gonna say it here. Everybody get offended on the live. Any white person get offended or whatever, or whoever likes to check off. I don't dig it. I'd be like, this don't make no sense. I don't get it. But I'm be like, listen, maybe that makes sense for his people. People's like, hey, this just makes sense. And I'm a seagull. I'm a person. Whatever. But it don't make sense to me. But it's not meant to. That's freedom too.
Yeah. What Paul say? Everybody want to be one till it's time to be one. Rest in peace.
And that's the thing about it. They continue to trying to copy our style, our way of being. But I'm like, it's deep rooted. Like RyAnn said, it's deep rooted. So the same, I think, also the same token, the same way that the oppression and how we're trying to safety systems are deep rooted. It's also very beautiful and poetic to me that there's a balance on one side, our flyness,
yes,
our joy, our motherfucking just overall being dope ass human beings is deep rooted. So we come up against this roughness, like I'm fly.
Yes.
I'm sad. I told my mom, I was like, I'm fly, but I'm sad sometimes. And it's hard. That's a hard balance to have, but it continues.
And that's the resilience.
Yeah, it's the resilience. And that's what Juneteenth is, y'all. For those who are still like tuning in and listening, Juneteenth is a continuing conversation that we hope turns into action. That's what I'm getting from this conversation. Is that we can talk all day. We can sit on here all day and tell y'all stories and examples of freedom and ways in which we want to claim freedom. But I think also we want to call to action. We call to how does this conversation make you change how you approach Black and brown folks in your space? How does this conversation affect the way you do art from now on? What art you support? How you advocate for Black artists in your space? Right? Because that's what happens. That's my biggest. That caused me rage when a white artist comes up to me and is like, I want to support you. How can I support you? And I'm like, hey, these are the ways for my next project.
Here's my cash app.
Here's
my cash app.
Like, oh, thank you. Ain't that bill been sent my way? Their reparation. Do you see what I'm saying? Or if I say to somebody, hey, I have a group of black kids I want to come and bring to see this show, right, at this theater. You got discount tickets? Oh, that's a really large group. I don't know.
Mm.
You can do that. What the fuck what?
Hey, hey, you are ruffling some feathers. I
I'll
love
be
it.
long off soon because I'll be like, Sabriaya, listen.
I love it. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Yo, I think Jose had put something in the chat, sir, because I think we were supposed to get a lovely piece from RyAnn, like to close us out. Oh my fucking God.
Let's
This is
do
about to be
it.
Shut up. All right. So last year I had the pleasure of being featured in a Black-owned magazine. It's a Philadelphia-based Black-owned magazine called Rawcast the Mag. So I wrote a poem called Black Thing, like not thing, but like thing, like Thang. So here it goes. Noir, everything then, now, and forever. Beautiful ebony, top of the hierarchy, innovative in the flesh. It is in our DNA and RNA. Salt throne only seasoned our sauce because damn, it feels good to be black. Wake up every day with high levels of melanin. It is a blessing to be black. Can't convince me otherwise. Royalty in our past and present, gold in our crown and front teeth, regal from the crown chakra down to our feet. We drip authenticity effortlessly. If I were them, I'd be jealous and envy because we do this black thing to a grand extent. Bosoms and hips that sway to the beats of life's drum played to keep us pressing on. Caramel to licorice physiques, there is no war with me and what we represent. Noir lives flourishing in our noir power. How dare we not be proud to be? Individualistic, so eccentric, full lips that are articulate, deep rooted in black abundance, a bragging right, so to speak. We do this black thing to a grand extent. No shame or wishes to repent, unapologetic in everything that shapes us. No regret on how we intimidate, forces others to respect to technique, mahogany dreams of who they wish to be. Our black has always been beautiful, an immaculate sight to see, a privilege to be black. Thank you.
Uh, yes, this has been such a beautiful conversation, y'all. Such
Yes.
a challenging conversation too. I love my Aquarius is like going off. I'm like, I think about what Donnell said. You know,
Uh-huh.
in the head. But thank you for both being here, for having this conversation,
Yes.
for celebrating Juneteenth, and making sure that we are continuing the conversations, but also calling to action, to make steps to build, community, and to move forward. Because these are important steps to make in our world, especially as it gets crazy and crazy out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we get flyer and flyer out there. So that's the balance.
Mm-hmm.
As it gets. Before we go, y'all have any last things to say? Things about freedom you want to say before we depart?
Just, I love y'all, man.
Yeah.
Say that.
Love
Yeah,
you.
that's love. I mean, that was so beautiful, man. Like I love y'all too. And I think another a way what freedom looks like. I think Philly just showed it yesterday. The Doom Day Festival is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That is freedom.
Yes.
Like to have a black led festival shut down a major street in Philadelphia. I think that's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's freedom. And we continue to look for it. That's the thing about it. We may talk about how tired we are of it and things that are issues that we have getting to it, but the journey doesn't stop because we gonna get ours.
Okay.
I love y'all. Oh my God.
Yes, this is great. Yo, if I don't see y'all, yo, have a great Juneteenth this
Yes.
year.
Yes.
Yes.
Y'all have a great Juneteenth. Have a great Juneteenth out there.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
black person, listen. Be careful who
Be
Ted
careful.
Salad eating on Juneteenth. Understand? Not every Brian already told us, not everyone's dish is the same. Okay? Walk in with blinders on. Walk in. All right, y'all.
All right.
Peace,
Thanks for
peace.
coming.